Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 190, I chat with journalists David Katzmaier from CNET, Brent Butterworth from About.com, and Mark Henninger from AVS Forum about all we saw and heard at CES. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded January 16th, 2014. Episode 190, CES 2014 Wrap-Up. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek and Director of Content at avsforum.com. This week, I've got 3 guest geeks to join me to talk about what we saw and heard at CES 2014. First up is Mark Henninger, the senior writer and social media manager at AVS Forum, and my colleague. Hey, Mark.
Hey, how's it going, Scott?
Good, thanks. Also, David Katzmaier, senior editor and TV reviewer at CNET.com. Hey, David, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here, Scott.
And finally, Brent Butterworth, the stereos guide at About.com. And Brent, you probably spent more time with audio, didn't you?
Totally 100%, except there was a Samsung party I got into, and it was like TVs, but they have free drinks. So,
well, welcome back to the show to you as well.
Thanks.
So those of you who are tuned in live at live.twit.tv can log into the chat room there or at irc.twit.tv. And you can post questions for us, and I will pass along as many as I can during the show. Okay, so CES 2014, we were all there. I myself put about 24 miles on my pedometer. Any of you guys measure your walking distance that you do at the show?
No, but I calculated it, and it was something like at least 8 miles a day. It was a lot of mileage.
A lot of mileage. David, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of walking, especially on press day, and then a lot of sitting around, and then a lot of walking. So yeah, I didn't quantify it, but it felt like some calories were burned. It was a nice post-holiday workout.
Yeah, exactly. Mark, I don't think you timed or measured your walking, did you?
No, I didn't, but I walked just about everywhere,
Yeah.
including to the Venetian and back, and inside the convention center. I did one grand tour of all 3 halls, and that was a really long walk, actually.
Oh, man. The convention center has something like 2 million square feet of floor space. And then there's the Venetian and some of the other hotels. Well, Mark, let me start with you. Brent and David and I have been going to CES now for many years. This was your very first CES. So what were your impressions overall of the show?
It was huge and glitzy, and there were some genuinely interesting new technologies to check out. And I guess it's the largest trade show I've been to. So yeah, I mean, I was almost almost starstruck, I would say, by by all that activity, having to actually force my way through crowds, almost like football. I felt like for a moment there, and yeah, I really enjoyed being able to be among the first to see new TVs, compare them to each other. That was a novel experience for me.
Mm-hmm. I think you said to me one time when we were there that everything in Vegas is so big and so far apart. And this was my initial impression when I first started going to the show as well. And Vegas hasn't really changed. I mean, it reinvents itself every year almost, and new hotels go up and old hotels go down. But it's just so huge. And when you say across the street, that doesn't mean, oh, well, it'll take 2 minutes to get there.
Yeah, it's hard to get a sense of scale because the signs are so large. You think something's close, and it's really, hey, I'll walk right over there, right? And you have to time for that. Even when you're inside a building, you have to time for, just walking down a hallway. Could take you 10 minutes.
Right, exactly. Brent, how long have you been going to the show?
Well, I started in 1990, so this was 25 for me.
Unbelievable. That's even longer than me. I think
wow.
I started in 91, so you're a year ahead of me.
Beat you
David,
by a year.
Yeah. David, how about you?
Just a lonely 13 for me. Although one of my first ones was with Brent, so that must have been like halfway through his tenure. So.
Well, you know, Mark, you mentioned all the crowds, and certainly in some of the booths, it was, you know, like elbowing people out of the way. Samsung, Sony, LG, I think were the three biggest ones that I really had a hard time navigating around. Any others? Any of you want to chime in on anybody else? Any other booths that were particularly difficult?
It was tough on the Samsung booth. They this year, for some reason, they decided to make the aisles particularly small in front of all the more interesting televisions. You know, so these huge vestibule where all the curved TVs were, which, you know, is kind of cool. And then you want to go and look at OLEDs, or we talk about that glasses-free 3D, or all these concepts that they have. And it's basically, you know, as wide as an office aisle, you know, walking between cubicles. It was really not the best design. That was the one that I, you know, luckily didn't have to spend much time in. I got in there early, but got out of there as quickly as I could, too.
Now, Brent, you spent probably most of your time at the Venetian, right?
You know what? Only a day there. I spent a lot of time at the North Central and South Halls looking at headphones and Bluetooth speakers, and you know, a little bit of time doing offsite stuff. So Venetian was sadly just one day for me. I had to almost literally run through it, and missed an awful lot of things I wanted to see. But still had a good time.
Yeah, yeah. SoCal Ray Jr. in the chat room says the booth that was difficult was the one that was not at CES. Harman at the Hard Rock. You know, Harman did that. They were not officially a part of CES, but they were at the Hard Rock, and they had all their stuff together. Did any of you get to Harman? I didn't.
I did.
Yeah? Did they have any cool stuff there?
It was fantastic. I spent about probably 90 minutes there, and I loved it. I went on Friday, the last day of the show. There was kind of nobody there, and so I got lengthy demos. I was attended to by lots of Harman people who could answer all my questions. The coolest thing they probably had, you know, they relaunched the Infinity line. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't see that. No, I have old Infinities myself that still sound great.
Yeah, they relaunched them, and they're actually built a little bit kind of along the lines of the fabulous Revel speakers I have sitting back in behind me. Same waveguide on the tweeter, pretty reasonable prices, and they also launched a new line of JBL Authentics, which is patterned on the old L series speakers like the L100. So they have the white woofers, and they have you know that waffle foam they used to have, the kind of square with the square waffle pattern in it?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, Scott. They have that. They brought that back, and they also are offering it in blue or orange, just like they used to, you know, way back in the day.
Wow. Now, were you able to get any kind of reasonable audio demo? This is one thing I want to ask you guys that heard a bunch of audio. It's difficult to really get a good audio demo. Brent, were you able to in Harman?
No, they weren't really demoing it. Yeah, the Bluetooth speakers they could play. Oh, I forgot to mention that Bluetooth speaker, the JBL, it has a phono preamp too.
Whoa.
Moving magnet, moving coil phono preamp.
Wow.
Oh, and it's tuned by Greg Timbers, the same guy that did the Everest speakers. So,
wow.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
But no, they weren't, except for the Bluetooth speakers, which of course, you know, anybody can demo a Bluetooth speaker.
Sure.
They weren't doing any demos at all. So I guess I have to take it on faith that the speakers are ready to go, working.
Yeah,
tuned.
yeah. David, did you spend any time on audio, or were you pretty strictly focused on TVs?
Yeah, no, we have a couple guys that did some audio. Matt Moscoviak was, as Brent was saying, wandering the floor trying to track down Bluetooth speakers, and, you know, gathered probably like 50 or 60 for a slideshow that we did at CNET.
Wow.
You know, crazy designs they had, you know, ones that look like alien heads and all this other stuff they throw together in the South Hall. But, you know, aside from that, I didn't really hear much. You know, I did hear a couple audio demos. None of it sounded like, you know, it was supposed to be, you know, authentic. I've heard, you know, even if they do take a lot of time to set it up, though, and you say something, they'll go, "Oh, this is the room. It's the room's fault. Sorry, we can't really do it here."
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the coolest thing that audio-wise that I saw was actually at, I guess, the Sony booth. They had this little lifestyle room set up. And, not for the quality, but it was just kind of like just stuff emanating from, everywhere, these invisible sort of speakers and projectors and, things on the wall. And just kind of ambient sound. So that was kind of cool to be in the middle of. But I don't think you get a really good idea of audio there.
No, Mark, you spent quite a bit of time at the Venetian. You can probably get a fairly good idea of audio there, even though hotel rooms aren't necessarily the best environment to show off audio. It's probably better than a giant convention center.
They're not, but at least the hotel rooms are pretty similar to each other. So to whatever degree they're flawed, the equipment is all struggling against the same sort of conditions. And to that extent, different companies succeed variously. I did hear a couple of good demos. I know that in the Krell room, I heard Blowing in the Wind, and it was better than anything that I could play on any stereo that I've owned. I'm sure, having to spend more than $100,000 to buy it helps explain that. And I thought that the Sony ES demo, which was split into two parts, that was probably the best demo that I heard. And room notwithstanding, they achieved what I would call like a true audiophile 3D sound field, the kind of sound that I would be happy with if I could afford it and had that at home.
Right. Now, one part of that Sony demo that was so important was the Sony, what were they? What were the speakers? The SS, I've forgotten the model number now.
AR1.
It's an SSAR1 with the Pass Labs 40th anniversary VFET amplifiers. Tell us a little bit about those.
All right. Yeah, these are two-of-the-kind amplifiers. They explained that Nelson Pass traveled the world, or at least scoured the world, to get these transistors that Sony made 40 years ago that had a reputation for just being musical, and built these two amps around it, and actually had the Sony speakers in the lab as he was building the amps. So the amps were intended to always basically power these speakers, and they're pure Class A. I forgot the exact wattage, a lot of watts going into these speakers, and they're a perfect match. And it was sort of like they described it as a love letter to Sony to celebrate its, the company's involvement in audio. And it sounded a lot like the ES system that was behind it, which sounded very good, but just a whole lot more of it. And the best part about the demo was how they were playing some Beck, is that his name?
Beck,
and it had that studio artist right in front of you, holographic feel, and then they switched to opera, and it instantly, the entire soundstage fell back like 60 feet and spread out, so that you had the sense that you were sitting in the audience in a concert hall watching opera, and the actors were in their part of the stage, and it was really like a three-dimensional, like falling back behind not just the speakers but the room, the wall in the room, and that's just coming out of two speakers, two amps, pure stereo signal. That's to me, that's real audiophile. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah. Brent, did you hear that system?
I did not, but I've heard it, and I actually skipped it because I've heard those speakers so many times in so many different places that, I told you I was only there for a day, so I had to kind of do triage, and I had to skip the stuff that I already had heard before.
Yeah, but you hadn't heard those amps.
True, but I'm reluctant at trade show to make judgments about amplifiers. It's like, how do you know what you're hearing? How do you know it's the amp? How do you know it's not the speaker? How do you know it's not the room, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So
sure.
if I go see amps at a trade show, I just go sort of ogle them and touch the fine, metalwork and move on.
Well, plus the fact, as Mark said, these amps are simply not available. I mean, you can't buy them because those Nelson Pass went and found the last VFET transistors he could find anywhere in the world. So it's not like you could actually buy them.
Yeah.
So SoCal Ray Jr. in the chat room is saying that the TAD demo sounded very good. Brent, did you get to hear that?
No, it's another one I skipped because I see him all. That's Andrew Jones from Pioneer,
Right.
and I sort of see him all the time. He seems to be at every audio show there is, and I go to pretty much every audio show there is, or most of them. So I see him all the time. I was really out looking for new stuff that I could write about, rather than for me it's really work, and it's not so much for my listening pleasure.
Yeah, it's true.
Although I did certainly get a lot of pleasure from listening to certain of the rooms. That's for sure. There were some pretty great sounding rooms there.
What stands out for you?
I can't really tell you why. Well, I could tell you why. The audio or the aerial acoustics room I thought was really great. Michael Kelly's new 6T tower speaker. And, there's absolutely nothing fancy about it. There's nothing remarkable about it. It just sounded absolutely gorgeous, and didn't have a lot of didn't really have any notable sonic colorations. I like the Bryston room a lot. They have a new, Bryston's kind of better known for professional style speakers, but they're doing more home style speakers now. They hired some it's a Canadian company, so they have Canadian speaker engineers who tend to be pretty great, and they've done a really, really beautiful job with those speakers. Again, standard tower speakers, I don't know, 4,000 a pair, 5,000 a pair, and just sounded I just didn't want to leave. They just sounded fantastic. They were just a real pleasure to listen to.
Speaking of $4,000 or $5,000 a pair, Mark, I think the Golden Ear Triton 1s were in that price range, right?
Right, and that was another good demo that I attended. In fact, I had not really heard of Golden Ear, I think, until I attended CEDIA with you and met Sandy Gross. But I made a point to go to their booth, or rather their suites. They had 2 suites, and the Triton ones, not knowing the price point, I let my imagination say, hey, these are 5-figure speakers, and then they did turn out to be a lot less expensive, or their target price point turned out to be a lot less expensive than what I just figured, photographing them, listening to them, but honestly being relatively ignorant of their product line or how they actually price their speakers, which is pretty aggressive, I think, for...
Yeah, I do too. I think we have a picture of the Golden Ear Triton 1s. John, if you can pull that up. I think I sent that to you. There it is. Nice, nice angle, Mark.
Thanks.
They aren't as tall as that makes them look, right?
No, but they're almost 5 feet. I mean, they're pretty tall speakers. They're not stubby little towers. They're grand.
Right. Well, let's get back to audio in a minute, but I do want to kind of bounce back and forth a bit between audio and video, because video... in the central hall anyway was huge. And David, I want to get your take on Ultra HD or UHD, which was everywhere, and in fact almost to the exclusion of HD TVs. I only saw very few 1080p displays. Everything was UHD, wasn't it?
Yeah, they especially in the big manufacturers booth, they really kind of denigrated the 1080p stuff. With reason, I think they're looking at making a lot more money off the 4K stuff this year. And, it's funny because I almost feel like 4K is passe now. And everybody's, talking about curved or, bendable or whatever. And that seemed to be the buzz at the show more than ultra high def resolution, which was really interesting because I don't think too many people saw that coming, saw the full push into curve that particularly Samsung did. So to me, that was kind of the biggest surprise of the show, besides the fact that they're actually going to ship their bendable television this year for some ungodly figure. That was kind of an amazing surprise for me.
I was amazed at that they were actually going to ship. They showed, for everybody who wasn't there, they showed a TV. I think it was an 85-incher. They might have had a couple other sizes, where you can actually push a button and it goes from flat to curved. It's some motorized thing. Why would anybody want that? David, what do you think? Why did?
Because if you regret buying the curved TV, and then you can always. There's no risk at all there. I mean, you could perhaps pull your chair a little bit towards the sweet spot marked with an X in your living room for the single person to enjoy the benefits of curved, and then when the whole family wants to watch it, you flatten it out. I don't think it'd be really interesting to see if they can justify that beyond that. You can reduce reflections a little bit depending on where the windows and lighting it is in your room if you curve the screen. But beyond that, I've been calling it, a gimmick with a cap or a lowercase g until I can spend a little bit of time, a lot more time than I have watching it. I've really only had about 4 or 5 hours total with a curved TV in my life, and that was in front of the OLED from Samsung. And the jury's still out, I think, but it's one of those things that just kind of reeks of like, we can do it, so we did, and let's see what the market says.
Mark and I both heard some different things from different companies. For example, Samsung said, and they, as you say, David, they put out a ton of mostly curved TVs, at least certainly in the Ultra HD or UHD category. They said, well, we did a market survey, and 80% of our respondents said that they preferred curved, whereas Toshiba said, no, our customers prefer flat. And so in their booth, all their TVs were flat. Even the 105-inch, ultra wide 21:9 screen that they had. Samsung and LG both showed 105-inch ultra wide as well that was curved. And Mark, didn't you hear somebody at LG say, well, it's because our executives really like curved?
That is something that an LG rep said. I guess they won't be named.
No.
Vizio was also all flat and 3D free. And, so there seemed to be a divide that the South Korean manufacturers are in a war, and part of that war involves out-curving the other. And I guess some other manufacturers decided to follow and others did not. But it's pretty clear that LG and Samsung are leading that charge.
Yeah. What is your impression, Mark, of, do you think curved TVs are valuable at all? Is there something there, or is it just because we can?
I think it's entirely because they can, and I think that the fact that it was supposed to differentiate OLEDs from LEDs, it took everybody kind of by surprise that all of a sudden LEDs have the curve also, and that's used to justify a higher price, I suspect, because I don't see what else it does.
Yeah. David, what's your feeling about curviness in TVs?
I don't disagree with what Mark said. I think a lot of the OLED thing in particular, because you're buying a 55-inch TV that generally costs $1,000 for 9 times that much, they want to make it, special. Same thing with the curve. I feel like, a lot of this is, hey, look at what I have on my wall. One of the things that I, didn't really consider writing these things up at CES, but which occurs now and after talking to people on Twitter, kind of amazing that, these things are supposed to be wall mounted, and it's kind of going to stick out of your wall. And imagine walking, around your room and clipping one of these things or whatever as well. It's kind of an issue, I think. All Samsung says, all their TVs are going to be wall mountable. A lot of people do have little, credenzas below the TV where their sources hang out and stuff. But in general, I think if I had, a TV on my wall, I'd want it to be flat, maybe in the corner with the curve. But it does seem one of these things that they're just going to throw out there on the market. And obviously, Samsung and LG have plenty of capacity to make as many lines of flat TVs as they want, and they have plenty of flat UHD LEDs as well. The question to me is how much these curved TVs are going to cost. I think I'm predicting that Samsung's curved 1080p TV will actually cost more than its flat 4K, UHD television, which comes to an interesting conundrum for people who are kind of choosing between those two at that price point.
Yeah. Well, that you bring up another question that I wanted to ask you guys, which is UHD, Ultra HD, 4 times the resolution of HD, is there. As I've said, the train has left the station. It's already happening. And yet that train is not fully loaded. We have the resolution, but we don't have things like dynamic range, wider color gamut. We don't have those things well defined. So I've generally said, in most cases, don't buy a UHD TV until those elements have been well defined, not only in terms of the display, but also in terms of the content. And will the content be delivered with that extra color gamut and that wider dynamic range and so on? David, am I wrong about that?
No, I don't think so. I think one of the things that people don't necessarily consider, though, and it does go back to the non-resolution picture quality aspects that you mentioned, contrast and color in particular, is that, UHD and 4K is so easy to manufacture with LCD that we're already seeing this. Manufacturers are basically, by default, making their high-end TVs 4K, making them UHD resolution, and, by the way, also putting in full array local dimming, which actually does make a huge picture quality improvement. So,
Agreed.
in other words, to get a TV with full array local dimming, you're pretty much going to have to buy a 4K one. I think Toshiba is the only one that announced a 1080p for full array local dimmer for 2014. And, it kind of goes down the line like that. If you want the best picture quality stuff that doesn't have anything to do with 4K, chances are you're going to be buying a 4K TV no matter what. So they are now the default flagship on these manufacturers' lines, and the 1080p ones they're going to start losing all these features. For example, Samsung, we loved their F8000 last year, really, really good edge-lit local dimming television. In 2014, Samsung does not have a 1080p local dimming television that's not curved. So if you want to buy a Samsung TV that's similar to the F8000 last year, 1080p local dimming, from an edge-lit device, you're just not going to be able to do it from them, which is kind of sad because, again, those sort of great features are going to filter up. So it's just like 3D. If you want a really great, TV that's 2D, you're probably going to buy a 3D one anyway because that's where all the picture quality enhancements are.
Right. Well, and one of the companies bucking the trend, aside from Toshiba, which you mentioned is probably the only one that had a full array backlight with local dimming 1080p, is Vizio. And probably, David, you went and saw Vizio, right?
Yeah, I really, last year, one of our favorite televisions at an affordable price point was the Vizio E-Series because they were the only people that did direct local dimming. And just real quick, direct is what they say when they don't have enough LEDs to say full array. I had an interesting conversation with Sony because their initial press release specified direct for their top-end model. And I was like, are you sure you don't mean full array? And they're like, oh, yeah, we mean direct. And then, of course, when the press release came out, somebody had corrected it and said, no, it's full array. So basically, X number of LEDs equals full array, and less than that is direct. But, long story short, Vizio has been putting local dimming in their direct sets last year, and the E-Series. The M-Series was edge-lit. Now they're transitioning over to direct on the M, and even the P step-up series. So those are, M is 1080p, P is 4K. Those are going to be direct or full array, depending on who you ask, local dimming televisions, which, could potentially be extremely good performers. One of the really, we're talking about price drops in 4K. Vizio said that their 50-inch P series, which is a 4K television, again, with full array local dimming, is going to be $1,000.
Ooh, that's right. I remember that, yeah.
It's got my out-of-the-box, ST60, we don't have plasma anymore, but now what do we turn to for picture quality for the money? I think Vizio is in the lead right now, just on paper, and potentially Toshiba with their range of 1080p full array televisions if they don't mess them up. So
if they don't mess them up,
there's some really interesting things that Vizio did, and we didn't even touch on their reference series, which was crazy.
No, and that's where I'd like to go next, actually. Brent, you probably didn't get to the Vizio room, or you might have for their sound bars and so on.
Absolutely. I always make it to the Vizio room because they're, one of the top 2 in sound bars, usually top 1. And I actually did look at their TVs and I saw the new reference series. I was pretty blown away, especially by the 120-inch flat one.
Yes.
That was, although, I said to Jim Noyd, their PR guy, I said, how are they going to sell that? He says, I'm not really quite sure yet. In terms of, you're going to sell that at Costco? That's a little bit of a stretch, but I was really shocked and impressed that they had it. And, yeah, their line interested me. I did like the Samsung Curve thing, and it would be cool to have if you wanted something, cool to have in your house that's, motorized and the screen can kind of do this, and it would impress people.
This is my impression. Well, I suppose this is one of the things about curved, getting back to curved for a second, that I think about it is if someone's going to buy a curved TV, it's kind of almost maybe for bragging rights, of, hey, look, my TV is curved. Yours is only flat. Which isn't a good enough reason in my book. But getting back to the Vizio reference series in particular, this was their flagship line that had some really remarkable properties. Mark, what was your impression of the reference series, and why was that?
My favorite effect, I guess what I like is that it has a high dynamic range capability, in this case, Dolby Vision. And the net effect is that very bright points, what you call specular highlights, that would normally be part of a white wash in the background are rendered with the added brightness. And I think the coolest effect is I think I saw Oblivion clips, throughout the show. But
Right.
On the high dynamic range sets, and especially on that Vizio 120, there was a palpable sensation like that there was fire. That it's like the suspension of disbelief that maybe you get with audio when you think you're hearing a real explosion. Suddenly it's like you think there's heat coming off of the screen, and I haven't had a TV do that to me before. So that was really cool.
You mentioned, I think it was you, that Vizio has dropped 3D from their entire line. I heard somebody else today tell me something slightly different, that they were only dropping it in their lower end lines. I have to confirm that. We don't know that for a fact. I was told
that's actually true, Scott. Sorry, the Vizio's. I think it's the M series 50 and above, including the P's and the R's, are all 3D. But the step-down E's no longer have 3D, and some of the smaller size in the M series no longer have 3D. So
okay. Well, then what I was told at the Vizio booth by a Vizio rep is incorrect.
Yeah, this was from Point, so take it from Brent and I know the guy. If anybody's going to know anything, it's that guy.
Is it passive or active now? Do we know?
I think they're still passive. Yeah,
passive. Vizio's always been passive glasses 3D, and I'm really glad to hear that they're sticking with that. Because I prefer it, and it makes a lot more sense, especially on a 4K or a UHD set. I saw a demo in the Sensio suite at the Las Vegas Hilton of passive glasses 3D on a UHD TV. I think it was either a Samsung or a Sony. I don't remember now. Where each eye only gets half the vertical resolution. So but with a UHD set, each eye is getting 1080 lines of vertical resolution. And so it looks a lot better than a passive glasses 3D on a 1080p set, in which each eye only gets 540 lines. So I'm really glad that Vizio, I would be interested in looking at 3D through passive glasses on a Vizio P series, the UHD or reference series, much more than I am from a 1080p set. But that brings up the issue. Another I think important thing that happened at CES, which is glasses-free 3D, which we saw from a number of people this year. David, what did you see along those lines?
The Samsung demo, we were talking about that a little earlier. They had a glasses-free 3D in their booth. It was soft for sure, but it had better depth. And the thing that they really did was they multiplied the number of positions from which you can experience the 3D effect. So previous glasses 3D, it had like maybe 9 odd positions that you could stand in around the room. You're going to put the X on your floor and make sure you sit there. But with the Samsung, you could just move your head around and get the 3D effect perfectly well. Sharp actually had a much more impressive one. They were using an even higher resolution panel to get the 3D up, because that's the thing with glass-free 3D. The more pixels you have, you're talking about the same effect with passive. You can throw those pixels at making a better 3D, a more detailed 3D effect. So they did a really good job too. I feel like that technology is pretty close. They could potentially market one of these things. Vizio had glasses-free 3D in their booth, looked good as well. The problem is, that 3D has already got such a sour taste in people's mouth from the last sort of glasses debacle, that I feel like manufacturers are pretty shy at this point in pushing a glasses-free 3D TV out there because, it just has that aura of, again, gimmick. Like, nobody wants to watch it. There's no content, blah, 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 blah. ESPN pulled out the whole 9. So it's going to be difficult, I think, for them to restart that engine, especially in the next couple of years.
Yeah, the Sharp glasses-free 3D demo was on an 8K panel using Dolby's glasses-free 3D technology called Dolby 3D. But Mark, you and I both saw and have had some experience with the other primary provider of glasses-free 3D technology from a company called Stream TV Networks, and their technology is called Ultra D. Tell us a little bit about that.
I'd be glad to. it turned out we saw them for the first time at CE Week in New York, and they had a 1080p panel. And I asked, when I found out that they were located in Philadelphia, I asked if I could visit their office. When I did visit their office, they actually showed me their first UHD TV prototype, and it was pretty compelling. I saw Life of Pi and Avengers, and it looked like real 3D. I remember that very clearly because it was like the first time I'd seen fish jumping out of a TV, with just my bare, without any aids to watching, the 3D effect. The next time I went back there, it was even better. And I was really anxious when I went to CES to see the other competing technologies, especially Dolby 3D, because I had heard that it was very similar. I do think at this point that Ultra D has the best looking, whatever it is, the lens or the panel. There's less light loss. It doesn't look as blurry as the Samsung, was especially blurry. I think they actually said that was only capable of showing 720p.
Per eye, that's correct. That's exactly correct.
And Dolby 3D did look very good. But to me, there was this effect where it looked like there was a screen door in front of it. In other words, like it had oversized pixels, and that was a little bit distracting. I saw the Sharp 8K TV that had Dolby 3D, and for some reason, those pixels were creating a moire effect that to me appeared to hover right in front of the screen, like you would see moire in a screen door. So I would give it to Ultra D from Stream TV just because I didn't see any artifacts in their TV. I mean, there's a, when you're just watching it, it looks transparent, that like you're looking at the actual material. And I also thought it was interesting because they had both native 3D and converted 3D, and the effectiveness of the converted 3D was better than I expected. I mean, it's not perfect, but it was consistently great. Anyway, I think all these guys have to wait for Avatar 2, 3, and 4 to come out. And they're all coming out one year after another. So I think there will be another 3D renaissance, and it'll all be on James Cameron's shoulders again. I think these guys will all have a product by then, and it'll succeed.
SoCal Ray Jr. in the chat room is agreeing that Stream TV 3D looked awfully good. Brent, did you get a chance to see any of this glasses-free 3D stuff?
No, I didn't. I have basically what David said. I'm so turned off by 3D at this point that I sort of go running from the demos. So I didn't get to see. I have seen a lot of it before. Obviously not as much as there was at this show. Now that people are really kind of trying to do something marketable, but no, I've pretty much stayed away from that. I do have a 3D TV. I watched it for 20 minutes in 3D and turned the 3D off and haven't used it since.
I think that's most people's impression of 3D. The one thing that I wanted to bring up too is, I stood in front of a lot of these demos, and I don't have a sensitive stomach, in general, and I did the Oculus Rift demo in 3D, and that was a lot more aggressive in terms of vertigo. But you'd certainly feel a twinge after you watch these 3D TVs for a while. I actually talked to some of the reps in the booths that were attending these 3D TV glass-free 3D demos, and to a man, they were like, "No, I can't watch this." Standing here for hours with this effect, they were just avoiding it. So that's something that again, autostereoscopic glasses, or autostereoscopic or stereoscopic glasses, they have to somehow fool you into this 3D effect, and it's not a hologram. So there's a lot of unnaturalness there, and we're pretty perceptive in terms of picking up on that. So I think that, even if they can get it to look really, really good, they're going to still struggle with a sizable percentage of the population for whom 3D makes them sick, and much more so than a 2D picture. So it's I think it'll be a tough road to hoe no matter what.
I do have a photo of the Samsung glasses-free 3D image that I just wanted to show people real quick, because they were showing a great little demo that they had actually shot called Food Fight. And they were throwing food at you coming out of the screen,
I told him
which was fun.
It wasn't a real movie. I mean, I thought this was out in theaters or something. It looks
No, it was something I think that they shot themselves for this purpose. It was interesting content I don't generally like stuff coming out of the screen too far, and this was a lot of that, so that wasn't too great, but it was interesting anyway. Well, let's talk a little bit about OLED or OLED, because last year we saw two products come on the market, the Samsung and the LG, both of which were 55 inches, not all that big, not terribly tiny, but not all that big, and curved, which we talked about before. Curved, especially at that size, I'm not really interested in, other than to cover it. But we saw a lot more this year. David, what was your impression of what we saw in terms of OLED this year?
I mean, I kind of felt like OLED was like the forgotten stepchild of the TV display shown at CES. I mean, yes, probably 80% of the world's existing OLEDs were at Las Vegas that week. And, you know, some of them were in booths that you never thought possible, like Hisense and TCL and these guys. You know, a lot of them had those things because they make great demo displays. And, you know, it was there. LG announced finally larger sizes that we're going to be shipping this year. So we'll see a 65, we'll see a 77 from them. Pricing undisclosed. A lot of this stuff is I feel like 4K is completely pushing it out of the way, which is really too bad, because obviously, just like with plasma, it's pretty difficult to make 4K OLED cost effective. And that's the main problem facing these guys right now, is the yields aren't even good enough to make 1080p work. So all of a sudden you got to make, you know, 4 times that many pixels. So it's going to be tough. I don't see that coming to fruition in terms of being a marketable product in the next couple of years, now that everybody's concentrating on 4K and curved.
Yeah, well, the OLEDs are curved as well. Mark, what was your impression of the OLEDs you saw?
Well, I think they look fine, but to touch on the quality issue, it's hard at some point to justify that pricing. Everybody that I've talked to wants them to be flat anyway, and nobody wants to pull the trigger on a 55 or even a 77-inch. And, you know, in the Panasonic booth, they were showing this prototype panel that they were saying looked as good as plasma. Wasn't quite. You know,
that was an LCD. That was an LCD.
That was an LCD. And I'm simply saying that by the time OLED maybe gains traction, maybe LCD will keep improving, and that it'll never actually have a chance in the public's eye, because it'll always be behind in pricing and size. I don't know if I'd hate that to be true, because it has the nicest image of all. I took a THX calibration class right after CES, and we had a 55-inch flat LG OLED in the room, and I got a chance to calibrate it. And you know, there's no doubt the end result, deepest blacks, just a incredibly fine image. But I'm not one to get too excited about something that I know that I wouldn't buy, because I can't afford it, and it wouldn't make sense even if I could.
Yeah. I think I have sent John a picture of an OLED that I took. If we zoom out a little bit, we'll see the or maybe it's full screen, and just in my little Skype window I can't see it all. But there's the 55 next to the 77, which is in the middle, and you know, the colors really pop. I mean, there's no question about it. But I think, Mark, you're right. You know, it's so expensive. You know, maybe people like Leo Laporte can buy the Samsung, as he did this year, just to have it and try it and see what it's like, because, you know, he's the tech guy and he needs to know these things. But for the average consumer, they're probably kind of out of reach. David, did you see the Panasonic demo in the blacked out room where they were claiming that plasma and a prototype LCD, they were looking at the ZT60, their current, you know, flagship plasma, their last flagship plasma, next to an LCD that they claimed had, you know, essentially equal picture quality. Did you see that demo?
Yeah, I did. I was a little unimpressed by the demo, mainly because it was really stacked. I thought they had a light literally shining on the ZT60. I thought even under the light looked washed out, much more washed out than I remember. So it was, I mean, it's not the worst, as in the, you know, the most full of crap demo that I saw there, but it was up there. The nice thing is that they said, you know what, we're working on LCD. You know, they definitely have plenty of engineering to throw at it if they want to. We're going to try and make our LCDs better, because they could certainly use it. The downside of that is that was not a shipping product. You know, they didn't announce any full array local dimming LCD TVs, Panasonic, this year, which is a real shame because other guys did. And if Panasonic wanted to, they could, again, use some of that great engineering from plasma and, ride on the coattails more than just via marketing. So that was overall probably the most disappointing demo I saw because, the TV did look good. And, there was definitely some issues off angle in particular that were different from plasma that we're never going to get back unless we have OLED. But, full array local dimming can look really, really good, as Sharp Elite can show you if you make a TV cost enough money. And that's what Sony tried for years, and they couldn't sell enough to justify making it. And maybe they figured out how to put in less LEDs and do it right, this year. Or maybe their Edge, which is still pretty good, is going to carry the torch. But to say plasma-like picture quality when it still has all of those issues, again, blooming, off-angle, that LCD will always have, no matter how many zones, it's too bad. Of course, the flip side is that it can get really bright, and you can get that HDR stuff, which to me was the biggest exciting thing, the high dynamic range stuff that I saw at the show. I agree with Mark. It can potentially be really amazing looking in person. And again, the best one that I did see was that Vizio reference. So.
Yep. I agree with that. Well, before we get back to audio, there's one other thing I wanted to touch on video, which is the appearance of larger screens. We already touched upon the Vizio 120-inch, and I think we have a picture of that I'd love to show everybody, which was the largest flat panel at the show. And if we can bring that up, there it is. That's a huge TV. And it's in their reference series, so it's got the high dynamic range, the wider color gamut, and perhaps most importantly, as an aside for those two particular items, Dolby is working with the studios to standardize those parameters in the content. They actually were showing content that had been graded or mastered with the expanded color gamut and the greater dynamic range. And this points the way to what I think is the most exciting thing at the show. I agree with David that it was really high dynamic range, but I need it to be not only in the TV, but also in the content coming at the TV. Because otherwise, if a standard content is coming to the TV that had been graded on a standard TV or a standard professional monitor, then the high dynamic range and the wide color gamut are only going to stretch that content out beyond where it was intended to be. So I was very excited by Vizio and Dolby working on high dynamic range and wide color gamut with the studios and providing content that took those things into account, not just the increased resolution.
I agree. Best case scenario, the content does, have that extra, was mastered in that. What they were telling me at Vizio is that, you can send out the stream of the normal non-HDR movie, and then you can ride it on top the HDR information, and it'll actually, if the TV can recognize it, turn that into into a lot closer to how it was mastered as an HDR film. And it is great to see the studios working with that. Again, that's a few movies that are going to have this. I do really think that it's cool to get a situation where the TV itself can handle it with any content, and you can switch it on and off. I don't necessarily think that they're going to mess it up. I saw a really interesting demo, closed door demo with Samsung, where they had their two 85-inch local dimming TVs, one right next to the other, and that looked really amazing. And that was basically an algorithm they just laid on top of it that you could do with any content. And and if you have if you have the hardware, you have an LED TV with enough dynamic range, with bright enough whites and dark enough blacks to reproduce those highlights and black areas, it can really look great no matter what kind of content you're looking at. And of course, added bonus would be great if you were watching a movie that had it. But it is a really cool concept, and I think it's about time to start talking about something that's not resolution. So I'm really happy to see that. The
other really large TVs I just wanted to show a picture of real quick. The Samsung added a 110-inch 16:9 flat TV to its S9 series, which before it was an 85-inch, and I think I have a picture of a 110-inch here with a person standing next to it. No, that's the 105-inch, but we'll talk about that too. three companies, I mentioned this earlier near the top of the show, Samsung, LG, and Toshiba all showed 105-inch ultra-wide UHD TVs with 5120 pixels across by 2160 up and down. So you can watch 2.35 to 1 movies without the black bars, and a lot of people really hate these black bars. There's the Toshiba 105-inch flat, which was the only one of the three that was flat. And then LG also had 105-inch. There it is. And the LG, by the way, has the Harman Kardon sound system in it, which I thought sounded really good. Did anybody else hear that? You must have seen that demo, Mark.
Actually, I was watching some of Life of Pi on that television, even though it wasn't in 3D. And if I recall, the audio actually did, yeah, you know, this is part of the trend towards larger TVs where the sound coming out of them is going to be better because you're going to have more stereo separation in those speakers and more room to just build a good speaker cabinet. And I guess that was consistent on some of those really big TVs, was integrated audio that was intended to be, you know, real audio and not just
was actually
an
pretty
afterthought.
good. Yeah. Exactly right. John, do we have the Samsung 110? I just wanted to show that one real quick. There it is. You know, that's a massive TV. You know, you got a person standing next to it. It's gigantic. LG also had a 98-inch flat panel, which don't remember if I sent that one or not. There it is. Also huge. So this addresses the issue of UHD resolution, which really benefits from having a larger screen size. And so the fact that we saw larger screens at CES, I think really helped that. Helps that. I'm sorry, I got a little distracted here. JC in the chat room said, maybe we should describe these terms HDR and wide gamut and things like that. For those of you who aren't familiar with those terms, HDR, or high dynamic range, refers to the difference between the brightest white and the blackest black. And at the moment, we have a certain dynamic range that is common in TVs that you can buy today. And what we are talking about is in the future, we'll have TVs and content, I'm convinced, that expands that dynamic range much wider. And primarily it means getting a lot brighter whites because blacks are already pretty low. So it means making TVs that can go a lot brighter than they are now. And some people might say, well, gosh, that means, I mean, already LED TVs are plenty bright. If they're made any brighter, they're going to burn my retinas. But I'm not talking about, you know, just pure white coming blasting off the screen. We're talking about what Mark said earlier, specular highlights. That is tiny little reflections off of reflective surfaces and so on that actually get much brighter on these high dynamic range or HDR TVs that make them look more realistic. So that's sort of quickly about what dynamic range is. And then wide color gamut is the range of colors that the TV can reproduce. And at the moment, we have a range of colors that is known by the technical name Rec 709. But with UHD, what the goal is, and we haven't really seen it quite yet, is another gamut or range of colors much wider than Rec 709 called Rec 2020. And the Vizio reference series, they claimed they got 80% of the Rec 2020 color gamut or range of colors. And that was clear on the side-by-side comparison in the Vizio room between their reference series, a 65-inch reference series, and a standard regular old TV that was playing content that had been graded for that normal dynamic range and normal color gamut on the regular TV, and then the wide gamut and high dynamic range on the reference series. Okay, well, in the time we have left, let's get back to audio. Brent, tell us about what struck your fancy in the realm of audio at CES.
Well, I got to add the golden ear technology system that Mark mentioned was a real highlight. I had a lot of questions from readers about that. just because it's what was it, $5,000 a pair, I think.
Yes, exactly.
And except it's got power base sections with 3 woofers per and some crazy amount of 1,600 watts, I think, per speaker. But it sounded basically like Golden Ear's other speakers, but with even more bass. And that's a really, it sounds $5,000 sounds like a lot for a pair of speakers, but when you compare it to a lot of what's out on the market at that range of quality and the extra bass that you get from this, that was pretty amazing. I thought that Golden Ear also showed a new, bigger version of its passive soundbar, which I was really happy to see because I happen to like passive soundbars. And that's, for people who don't know, that's a passive one is one of the kind of soundbars that you have to hook up to a receiver. So you have a receiver and the soundbar, so you're getting a lot more power and a lot more quality in general. I saw that. Did anybody else see the new Hi-Fi Man headphones? I thought they were pretty incredible.
Mark, did you hear those?
I did not. I didn't listen to any high-end headphones. I must
Okay.
confess.
Brent,
what?
back to you.
Just Skull Candy?
No, I don't think, Mark, you didn't hear Skull Candy either, right? You heard.
I didn't really put a big effort into listening to headphones. We don't really have a section to post stories about them on AVS, just a review section. So unless I was reviewing them, it didn't make that much sense to go through them.
Mark, you did hear the House of Marley headphones, right?
I listened to them. It was like one of the last things I did before I left the show, and it was those were good headphones, but they were lifestyle headphones, much like Beats or I hate to say the word Beats, but or Monster Inspire or Bose. They have noise reduction in them, and But anyway, they were comfortable, and I thought they were indicative of what's typical out there today, where you spend a few $100s, you get something, really luxurious, battery powered, it blocks out the outside world, it gives you lots of bass, even if you've got a weak little preamp in your phone. Yeah, so that's cool stuff. I'm glad that that's the state of a nice pair of headphones these days.
Brent, did you hear the House of Marley headphones?
Oh, yeah. I spent a lot of time at their booth. I heard their Bluetooth speakers. But the Hi-Fi Mans were probably the most impressive to me. They're known for the high-end audiophile planar magnetic headphones.
Oh,
and
yeah. I've heard them, and they're great.
Oh, yeah. The nice thing is they finally hired an industrial designer to work with them. So now they have... It makes a big difference.
Now they look nice besides sounding good, right?
Well, not only in the looks, but they're a lot more comfortable. The headband works a lot better than it did. They don't feel as heavy and bulky. It's not like you feel like you have a bunch of big buckets strapped to your head anymore. And they made some sound quality improvements as well. They actually went to a completely new driver with normally the planar drivers have it's a plastic sheet suspended between two metal sheets. And they came up with one that has just one metal sheet, which they say has a, kind of more spacious sound. And it's also lighter in weight. So it's not like a big thing hanging down on your head. I was pretty happy with those. I got to say, though, we talk about Skull Candy, but their Crusher headphone that has the little tactile transducers built into the headphones, that was actually pretty cool. I was really surprised.
I'm not familiar with that. What is that deal?
Well, they built it. They take a sort of normal headphone. It's like a $100 headphone, and it's a pretty good headphone. It sounds like a good mass market headphone, and they build tactile transducers into it with a level control on the left earpiece. So the headphones themselves actually sort of do the shaking thing like this. So obviously for home theater applications, if that's what you want, that's a good thing. It actually, whenever I go to Skull Candy, they always push me off to the engineers right away. And, because they sort of, those guys talk my language and the marketing guys really don't. So I had a long chat about headphone measurement with this young guy there. And then he said, "Oh, you got to hear the Crusher. Have you not heard the Crusher?" I'm like, I was like, no, I walked by it. I assumed it was going to be terrible. He said, no, you got to hear it. And I put it on and, I listened to it. I'm like, well, it's a decent headphone. And then I turned those transducers on and I just doubled over laughing. It was so much fun. But then I found that actually I liked the sound a little bit better with a little bit of the transducer in there. It actually had a nice kind of fun, visceral sort of effect. And when you're watching an action movie, why not? For 99
Is this
bucks?
kind of like, for 99 bucks, is this kind of like a D-box or butt kicker kind of situation? Is that what we're talking about?
Exactly, but in a pair of headphones.
Wow.
Not as dumb as it sounds.
And it would seem to me to be very distracting, and I would think it would be uncomfortable, but you actually experienced it, so I'll take your word for it.
I would strongly recommend that you check them out, because you're a home theater guy, and this is an experience that you have to have.
Wow, I guess so. Okay. Well, what else? What else was that? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You don't sound convinced.
Well, not yet, but the proof is in the pudding. And as I always say, when HD first came out, or when UHD is now coming out, when OLED's coming out, we can talk about all of this stuff till we're blue in the face, but it really doesn't make an impact until you experience it for yourself. So I'm going to take my own advice and go find them and try them out for myself. Try and keep an open mind.
I'm dying to hear what you have to say about it.
Okay, well, give me your best sound at the show.
Tough call, but the Golden Ear room was pretty fantastic, and the Ariel room was great. The Bryson room was great. Those are my three favorites.
Three faves.
And the best headphones at the show were, I actually heard a new prototype of the Oppo Digital planar magnetic headphones. They weren't.
Oh, I've heard about those.
Yeah, they were in a suite at the Marriott, and they have they're in a more final stage of development, and they have a special amplifier for it. Not a special amplifier, just a good amplifier. And that really completely blew me away. That's going to be a pretty exciting product. Expensive at maybe $1,000 to $1,200 for the headphones, $1,000 for the amp. But I'm really looking forward to hearing those. And they also fold flat, so you can carry them in a normal computer bag or something.
Wow, cool. Okay, Mark, your favorite sound at the show?
I'm sticking with what Sony did with the Pass Labs 40th anniversary and the AR1 speakers.
Okay.
That's what I would aim for in my own home.
If one could. But since those Pass Lab amps are never going to be available,
all right,
what
gotta
was
go over to the Krell room.
There you go.
To Krell. Yeah, Krell is my real world ideal amps. Maybe for bragging rights. I don't care. Sure.
Okay, and what speakers were they using? I think Krell makes their own speakers.
I forgot the brand name, but they're the Sonya 1.2s.
Oh, YG Acoustics, right.
Right. $100,000 speakers, I gather.
Right. You also like the Golden Ear room, though, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's the real world. And I actually thought that they had qualities that I could praise completely independently of their price. Namely, like a transparent soundstage where all the elements, had dimension. A voice is only so large, because a mouth is only so large. But an upright bass is a larger, more voluminous sound, and it rendered those different aspects to proper scale, which is it's a high-end trick for sure.
Yeah. David, you might be like me. I would have a hard time picking the best sound at the show because I didn't really spend much time with audio. Same situation for you?
Yeah, I'd have to go straight to video. I mean, like Brent, I'm there to work, and we got a lot of people going from CNET every year, and a lot of those guys do a lot more audio than I do.
Yeah. Okay. I'd have to say for me, because, and this is by no means, indicative of audio at the show, generally speaking, but probably the best I heard was coming out of that LG 105 ultra wide UHD TV with the Harman Kardon sound system. But I don't think that was the best sound at the show. It was just the best of what I heard, which wasn't much audio. So let's go to video. David, what was your favorite video at the show? Best picture.
I mentioned kind of skewed demos before, which is I think what Vizio did with their 65-inch demo. That said, I think the reference series is certainly the best looking picture I saw at the show. They had some incredible 4K demo footage, better than most of the stuff I've ever seen. There's some Rose Bowl stuff in particular that looked unbelievable. That plus 120 inches. Plus the full array local dimming with the two different colors of LED and the almost Rec 2020 color. just was an amazing combination. They really nailed that demo. Maybe the best demo I've seen that's not a comparison demo at CES ever. So yeah, it was spectacular. Again, I've seen OLEDs look like that in a dark room, but I've never seen anything really look like that in in that kind of lighting environment, and also again with the demo material they chose. So they win hands down.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. That was my pick for the best picture at the show as well. And Mark, if I'm not mistaken, yours as well, huh?
It's unanimous. That was the best display. The way I like to describe it is when all those elements come together. You have high motion resolution, really rich color, great contrast. Great. It actually gives you an illusion of three-dimensionality without any gimmickry. You just believe in the image you're looking at. That's what the Vizio reference TVs did for me.
And Brent, what about you?
I'm going to have to concur. It was the only one that the Vizio reference series was the only thing I saw where the focus was really on improving the picture quality, as opposed to some kind of gimmick. So yeah, I have to vote for the Vizio reference series. No question about it.
Okay. Well, actually, Zephyr in the chat room has brought up something that I meant to bring up, and somehow we managed to not, which is content delivery in 4K or UHD. And the big story there at the show was Netflix and other online providers, Amazon Instant Video, I think, YouTube certainly, MGO, I think, all announced that they were going to start streaming 4K or UHD. For example, Netflix House of Cards season 2 is going to be streamed in 4K. And I heard somebody at the show, more than one person, say that to get a good picture in 4K or UHD is going to require a downstream bandwidth of something like 15 megabits per second sustained. David, what did you hear along those lines? My impression is that the first delivery corridor or the first way that people are going to get UHD is going to be streaming. It's going to be online or downloading possibly from Sony and others rather than broadcast or satellite or cable.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, I think it was at the Sony press conference when they first broke the 15 megabits, sort of announcement. That was with Reed Hastings' second appearance on press day. His first was at LG in the morning. He's the Netflix CEO. So that's a huge
CEO,
deal.
right?
They can, Netflix can do streaming better than anyone. I think they really can manage bandwidth better than anyone and make the picture quality for limited bandwidth look better than anyone. The jury's still out, but, back of the napkin calculation tells you that 15 megabits is not going to look as good as 1080p Blu-ray because they have a lot more bandwidth to play with. 4K over that stream, that's half as much. And again, Scott, if 15 megabits per second for a lot of people is, just not doable, especially during prime time, especially if you're not on Verizon Fios, and trying to maintain that amount of bandwidth is not going to be easy. Now, I think bandwidth is going to go up. They're going to start tiering people. There's going to be, you can buy it. I attended a conference, a panel at CES where the Comcast CTO was basically telling people, like, you know what, we're kind of happy about 4K because it's going to mean people are going to buy more bandwidth from us. And that's really the bottom line. I mean, it's going to require more bandwidth regardless of the efficiencies of HEVC, H.265, which is the decoding that's built into these 2014 4K TVs that allows them to stream 4K from these services. So, obviously that's going to be the mechanism before 4K Blu-ray arrives. When 4K Blu-ray does arrive, I would be really surprised if streaming looked anywhere near as good. And I think streaming, is going to have a hard time. 4K streaming is going to have a hard time keeping up with what we know now as 1080p Blu-ray, especially when you're not talking about a gigantic screen, and especially if you're, getting a regular download speeds, and you want to watch something between the hours of 8 and 11.
Right. Not to mention data caps, ISPs, internet service providers, often cap the amount of data that you can consume per month. And at 15 megabits per second, you watch a few movies, and you're going to hit that cap right away.
Yeah, and that's where you're going to, and you see that the people going to Amazon or whatever, they get the choice. They can choose between HD. Vudu has 3 tiers, HDX, HD, and SD. And then, of course, there's going to be a 4K stream on top of that. Maybe there's going to be 4K HDX from Vudu. Who knows? So, they're going to tier all these prices, and you're going to have a choice to buy one or the other. And I think it's going to be difficult to, convince when you're sitting there with your wife choosing which one to do, to go with the full bandwidth one, especially because it might not look that great. And a lot of times people go, you know what, this HD one looks good enough. And again, that comes down to the real issue with 4K anyway, or otherwise.
Now, the Blu-ray Disc Association was not at the show. We didn't hear anything official about a Blu-ray or an optical disc format for UHD or 4K. So we really don't know what's going on with that. I'm certainly going to dig into it. I'm sure others of us are going to as well. But for now, the internet is going to be where we're going to get that 4K content.
Pretty much they're on track for CES 2015. So, there you go. There's your
okay. All right. Well, then let us converge again then in a year from now, and we will talk about everything new that will be in a year from now. And meanwhile, we've got a year to review some of the great TVs we saw and some of the great audio products we heard. And it looks like it's going to be an exciting year for all of us. So I want to thank you all three for being on the show. David Katzmaier from CNET.com. Thanks so much.
No problem.
And Brent Butterworth at stereos.about.com. Lots of audio goodness over there. Thanks, Brent.
Thanks, Scott.
And Mark Henninger and me are both at avsforum.com. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for having me on the show, Scott.
You bet. As I said, you can find me and Mark at avsforum.com. You can email me at scott@twit.tv, and you can follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott. You can also follow AVS Forum, which is mostly Mark's doing, at AVS Forum. Easy enough. You can also find previous episodes of Home Theater Geeks right here at twit.tv/htg and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/twithometheatergeeks. Now, next week, I'm still working on securing a guest, so let's make it a mystery. Undoubtedly, it'll be someone with lots of interesting things to say about audio and video, so I do hope you will join me. Until then, geek out.